People don't maintain their yards, you know, it's kind of slummy. But it's
Yeah.
Kamaaina to the max, and the
Yeah.
people who had the vision for it originally are kind of committed to sticking it out, you know,
Yeah.
with their families. Yeah. I just recently had a couple-hour meeting with someone I'm consulting with there.
Yeah.
And I was just shocked. He's been in the house for 52 years, he said.
Wow.
He ain't moving, even though he's just such a successful member of our community. He won't move up that ladder into nicer places. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I forget what those houses went for, but they were, you know, in comparison to today's numbers, it was peanuts, really. But
oh yeah,
it wasn't peanuts at the time, but they needed to get the people out of the plantation housing.
that's right.
And so they made it, you know, attractive for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a lot of cinder block homes, but mostly post and pier.
Yeah.
Mostly one story, but you've got a lot of homes have added second stories. And
when you go down Punane Avenue from the old mill heading towards Kahului, that very first house on the right that you come to, the guy had that house. He built his boat. It was one of the biggest fishing boats you ever saw. And
in the front yard?
Out of that yard was, I mean, they needed like 18 engineers and whatever.
Yeah.
It was a mess getting them out. Yeah. That was really funny. That was like 1955 or 6 or something like that.
Yeah. It's the, I remember, I don't know if you know, but the road that was the road that led to the factory where they would process the sugar cane.
Yeah.
And when I first moved to Kihei, and we'd come into Kahului to see a movie or something, because there was nothing out there in Kihei. And when you drive in and you right by the sugar mill,
right,
it was still pumping that smoke in the air, which some people found that smell pleasing, but for me, I just couldn't stand that smell.
So my dad was the factory superintendent.
There you go.
Both Punane and Paia. He came home smelling like that, so I thought it was fabulous. That's exactly that's how I grew up.
It's a memory. It triggers pleasant memories.
Oh,
right.
and when he saw smoke coming out of the stacks, he knew one thing: they were making money.
Yeah.
If there's no smoke coming out of the stack,
no, not for a while. But the thing that went before they actually stopped the sugar mill was there were both sides of the road, Punane Road, down there where the sugarcane factory was.
Yeah.
Both sides of the road were like a canopy of
what
are those called? Those trees, rainbow eucalyptus. They were eucalyptus trees.
Yeah.
Rainbow eucalyptus lining both sides, creating a canopy on top. I used to love driving through it. That all got torn up by the roots. And it got torn up because eucalyptus has very shallow roots. And so if there was a bad storm or something, it would always run the risk, or sometimes would fall down. And so they didn't want the liability anymore, the government, and they uprooted all those trees. They've done a lot in Olinda as well, which is up country, what used to be beautiful eucalyptus trees, the rainbow eucalyptus. Now they're just pulling them up and uprooting them. Yeah, it's just so sad. But that was my fondest memory, was that canopy, driving into Kahului through that canopy.
Yeah, absolutely. I can send you plenty of pictures of smoke coming out of those chimneys.
Oh no, I have unpleasant memories. I did not like that smell. To me, it smelled like puke.
Absolutely smells fabulous to me.
It has
I gotta get my big dog out of my office here. She's gonna want to participate in her own barky way.
Oh yeah, you want to get rid of that.
Yankee, come. Yankee, come. No, we're going this way. Okay. Yep. I'll. Okay. I have a 75-pound golden doodle, so.
Chair, it's 3:45. We can begin.
Okay, very good. I hereby call this meeting of the Elections Commission to order. It's 3:45 on March 18th. This meeting is being conducted by video conference and telephone. I would like to remind the commissioners to keep their camera on for the duration of the meeting. Jamie, could we get a roll call?
Chair Anderson,
Present?
Commissioner Curtis,
Here.
Commissioner Dean,
Present.
Commissioner Kikuchi,
Here.
Commissioner Kohler,
She's here. She's
Yeah, okay, I'm here. I'm here.
thank you.
Hmm.
Commissioner Kuwata,
Go out of here.
I do see him here.
I'm here.
Thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner Mata, Commissioner Seilstad,
Here.
Commissioner Takenaka.
Present.
You have a quorum, Chair.
Thank you. Okay. Next up. This meeting is being recorded, will be posted on the Office of Elections website at electionshawaii.gov shortly after the conclusion of this meeting. As a reminder to the public, your microphone will be muted until you are called upon. I call upon now Scott Nago to give the status of operations report.
Can I get my video to start? Oh, you have before me my March 11th status of operations. Since we met last, the reapportionment and redistricting petition has been dismissed. So the office is moving forward with candidate filing for all seats for the 2022 election. In the legislature, we have two bills alive. They are housekeeping measures. One is to make the dates for the political parties to submit their party officers and party rules on the same day. Currently, it's two different dates. We're trying to consolidate that so that we can, it's easy for them to remember. And the other one is making the withdrawal of petition signatures for petitions the same as withdrawal for signatures of nomination papers. So they both currently have different requirements to withdraw a signature from either a nomination paper or petition. We're trying to make the petition the same as a nomination paper. Other bills we're following in the legislature are a voter pamphlet. The legislature wants us to create a voter pamphlet with candidate statements in it. We're asking that it be for the 2024 election because the 2022 election is around the corner and it still gets signed. After candidate filing closes, there's no way for us to get those statements to compile to send to voters. We've also met with the Republican Party about the statewide voter registration system to explain to them how the voter registration system works and to answer any questions they've had. That's all I have. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Who was at that meeting with the Republican Party?
That was myself, my staff, the chair, state chair, Lynn Finnegan, Adriel Lamb, one other person I don't know, and also the chair of Scotty Anderson.
So you met with Scotty, Ariel Lamb, yourself, Lynn Finnegan, and somebody else that was with her. And you had an AG with you?
No.
And the outcome of that meeting?
It was just a meeting to basically explain our processes to them, our registration process, our election process.
Was that initiated after Mr. Lamb's discussion at our last elections meeting?
I believe that was initiated by the chair of the Republican Party.
Oh, thank you. Not Scotty, not the chair of the Elections Commission.
No, the chair of the Republican Party.
Okay, yeah, because Scotty said he was going to look into it last time. Okay, thank you.
I have a question, Chair. This is Lillian
Yes.
Cole. CEO Nago, you say on page 3 of your March 11 status of operations report, you said in the paragraph at the beginning of that page, you say, quote, "We further explain that absent any specifics, a review of voter fraud claims would be difficult to impossible to undertake." So my question with respect to that is, what were you referring to? What type of voter fraud claims that you felt you didn't have sufficient specifics to be such that it would be difficult to impossible to undertake? Because I'm aware, as I'm sure you are, because you've seen it as well, the Hawaii voter registration rule things that Mr. Lamb has provided to this commission as well as to your office, things that appear were very specific. I mean, there were like 18 pages, I believe, of irregularities in one regard, and then other types were also identified with great specificity, with charts and names and dates. So, and you responded to that in a letter to the Elections Commission on March 16, not on March 16, but rather, yeah, on March 16, sorry, on March 16. And so I'm wondering, when is, for you, Chair, is this the time for us to talk about that as well? Because Mr. Nago's March 11th status of operations report was very cursory, whereas the March 16 report that he gave on Hawaii's voter registration roll was a very comprehensive 6-page letter and was purporting to respond to those specific concerns with documentation and analysis provided previously by Mr. Lamb. So is this the time for us to delve into the March 16 letter from, it was not just from Scott Nago, but it was also signed off by each of the county clerks for each of the counties. So is this the time to do that, or do we wait for another time?
Today will be the time to do it. What I was hoping to do with the advice and consent of the other members is we have Mr. Lamb is apparently going to address us today, as is one other person. I kind of wanted to get Sandy Ma, and I kind of wanted to get those two things out of the way and then possibly go into executive session to go into that report. Or we can even say.
So we can't talk about it publicly? We can't talk
Pardon
about it before we go into executive session?
We can, unless I get advice from the AG that we have to get off, but we would talk about it. But I'd like to get those other, I'd like to get Mr. Lamb and Ms. Ma first.
Right.
And then go into it, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I don't mind. But
Okay.
but so to the one question I did ask regarding the status of operations report from Scott Nago, if I could just ask him here, that last, like I said, the third paragraph, the third page, you kind of make a very generalized statement there, saying we further explained, meaning explained to, I guess it was Lynn Finnegan and whoever else showed up at that meeting that you just described that you had with the members of the Republican Party in Hawaii. And you said, we further explained that absent any specifics, a review of voter fraud claims would be difficult to impossible to undertake. So I'm wondering, was there a context for that, for making that statement? Were you guys discussing in that meeting the materials that Mr. Lamb had provided in January 12th at our last meeting of the Elections Commission, or any of his subsequent materials that he's submitted, which we all have as well?
So at that meeting with Mr. Lam, it was explained to him that without absent of any specifics, we can't look into exactly what he's alleging. He did note at that meeting that he would get us information, or he would get us the details, which he did subsequent to the status of operations, which is dated March 11th. On March 14th, he did send out the specifics that he was talking about, and then we did look at those and we answered it on the 16th. So when the letter was written on the 11th, there were no specifics provided.
Got it. So now later, when we have a discussion about your March 16th response, that will be where the goods are, basically where the details are that you were able to respond. Okay,
Right.
That sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're now in the section of public testimony, and any person who, well, we have, I know of 2 people who have submitted to testify. Jamie, is there anyone else?
Oh, hi, Chair. This is Nedeline. For individuals who would like to testify, please press the button that says raise hand located under the reactions icon. If you are joining us by phone, please press *9. When recognized, please unmute your microphone before speaking. For the record, please state your first name and last name and the items you will be testifying on. For those testifiers joining us by phone, we will not have your name and will be identifying you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. The first testifier is Adriel Lam, followed by Sandy Baum.
Thank you. Mr. Lam, are you ready?
Yes, good afternoon, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to provide public testimony at this time. I just want to thank the Commission and the Office of Elections and all those involved with taking my concerns I brought up during 12 seriously. I appreciate all the input that Kara went into responding to those questions. And I especially appreciate it as I didn't come to this commission as with any title or name recognition, but other than concerns from my friends and the people I've dealt with to work on this. And so appreciate the concern that went into it. I do want to update a few more things in addition to the written testimony I provided in the written statements I provided March 14th. I understand the county clerks or the message from the Office of Elections and 4 county clerks did not find any systemic problems or voter fraud. And I would just want to, highlight back, well, I don't want to cast any blame on anything, but I have concerns when we look at the due diligence of what needs to be done with the voter registration rolls, where 1 year after the elections, when we look at the voter rolls, there's still 302 voters who voted in the 2020 elections are still marked inactive. And not only that, 10,680 voters or voters who voted in the last 4 elections are still marked inactive. And that's concerning because out of that 10,000, I noticed those 10,000 never didn't seem to vote in the 2020 elections. Were they not given a chance to vote, that they were still marked inactive and not given ballots? But what I find also concerning is given the vast amount of registrations, which I think it's debatable, right? Where the registration is coming from. We have 83,943 registrations who did not vote in the last 4 elections, and they're marked active. So that brings the question, where are these registrations coming from? And how are they being updated? I will just highlight 2 examples here that were come to my attention since our last meeting. One is the mother of 8 children, 8 grown children who are eligible to vote. 7 are registered to vote in the state of Hawaii. 2 are incarcerated though. 2 of those 7 are incarcerated. 2 have moved out of state. And 1 also recently moved out of state. So that leaves 2 who were registered to vote and voted in Hawaii, but 7 were registered to vote and had their registrations updated within the last 5 years. I do have another military family member who came to me and said that she was previously registered in Hawaii, moved away for 8 years, voted in the state that she's residing, came back last year to vote. And when we looked at her voting record, she has been voting for the past 8 years prior to the 2020 election. Those are just 2 examples. But I would say, I'll just leave that with, transactions being made in the voter database. There is one person here in this room or within the commission and the office of elections who's appeared in the 4 updates that we had of the voter file, appears to have a transaction every single time. Well, granted, I guess this person may move every 3 or 4 months, but there was a transaction change. There's a transaction made in February, September, and November the same year. I don't know if there's address update. There didn't seem the address update to any of those changes, but there was transaction update. So I'm concerned about what is being done with the voter registration rolls, and I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Nago, do you want to respond at this time?
So as far as his last comment regarding the person whose transactions every 4 months, we are constantly updating, we are constantly verifying the systems. So that is testing. So we do test to make sure that the system is working properly. So we do put things in to test the transaction, the audit log. Whether it's fraudulent, I mean, I would think you'd be happy that we're testing, but if he doesn't want us to test anymore, we won't test. We did answer his, Mr. Lamb's allegations. He had 4 allegations in his written testimony. The voter registration names that appeared on the list that did not appear on the list in a timely manner, those were 16-year-olds. So if you pre-register pursuant to law here, you can pre-register. You will not show up on the voter registration roll until you turn 18. Therefore, they wouldn't show, even though they registered 2 years earlier, they won't show up until their 18th birthday. He also alleges that voters only had 1 name. Like I said in our response, every registration has a paper document to back it up. We looked at the 2 names he provided. They in fact do have 1 name, and I was reminded by the clerks that there is not a law that requires a voter to have first and last name. Voters can have 1 name. He's also alleging that there was a transaction date. As I stated earlier, that we had migrated from the previous mainframe voter registration system to a new voter registration system. And so everybody who migrated over from the old registration to the new registration had that date of migration. Since then, the clerks have been going through and doing their due diligence and updating everybody's registration date to their registration date that they actually registered on. And lastly, he makes reference to the amount of voter registration records within the last 5 years. We don't know where he's got that number, but we have seen an increase in voter registration since the 2020 or even prior to 2018 election. So we don't see anything unusual with that.
Thank you. Okay.
If I may, Chair,
Yes.
Chair, since we have both Mr. Lamb and Mr. Nago here at the same time, I would like to ask Mr. Lamb if the response that Mr. Nago provided, both in the March 16th response as in writing that he and the individual county clerk signed off on, as well as in his testimony just now, response just now, Mr. Nago's response just now, does that resolve the issues in your mind, Mr. Lamb, of what is it responsive to the concerns you raised, and is it dispositive of indicating to you that there's no foul play of any kind or systemic problem of any kind that needs to be further investigated by the appropriate authority.
Thank you, Commissioner. I really appreciate the letter that the CEO Nago and the clerks put together to respond to that. And I would just first off, I appreciate Mr. Nago talking about checks in the transaction, that his staff does put their transactions in there to check the systems, and I appreciate that that's being done. In regards to the letter, it seems that when the letter explains how some of the updates were needed to be corrected, that some transaction dates were misplaced between what was documented and what was done in the transaction, as well as registration dates, whether the old registration date of a canceled registration was inputted or the new registration date of a canceled registration was back in there, that there's confusion. So it does seem like a systemic problem that thankfully they have corrected, but that we're not unaware of. So it was informative about what the processes were of how these inconsistencies or anomalies appeared to show up, but it does not explain everything. As I noted in the registrations that appear retroactively, there are a lot of 16-year-olds that turn 18-year-olds, but then there are a lot of records in there that also popped up, which were from 1993, 1986. Are those also explained? So I still have questions on these registrations, and given the examples of these registrations of just one family who had 4 registrations that were not from the family members, they have testified, or they have told to their mother that they did not register and these are not their transactions. How do we know that these are not faulty or fraudulent registrations?
Is this the one where you were saying there were 8 adult children, 2 are incarcerated, 2 are on the mainland? That one, and only 2 of them claimed to have voted, but all of them voted based on the record. Okay, so do you have the specifics to identify those individuals so that you could provide it for Mr. Nago to follow up on specifically as he's followed up on the other data that you've provided?
I do have the names, and I can provide that.
You don't have to state it here, but just provide it to Mr. Nago, yeah.
And that's just an example of many other people have come to us and talked about they received ballots for their kids who were moved away 15 years ago, or 10 years ago, or their mother who died 20 years ago. How are their registrations being updated in the system? And who did the check? Who did this? Who was the one that did the transaction? So I guess there should be an audit log, right, of when these transactions are made. And we can go back to who did these transactions, how it was inputted.
So you can identify all of those that you're speaking of? In other words, and
Yes.
provide that to Mr. Nago additionally? Okay.
I can provide the names.
Good. And then on the same thing, there was a letter, actually it was an email to you that we all got a copy of, Mr. Lamb. It was written to you on December 28th, 2021 by the Office of Elections. So it was an email response and to the concern that you had raised on December 21st, 2021. And that the subject matter of that was the list ID and issue. And we spent a lot of time in January, at our January 12th, 2022 meeting, our last meeting, discussing the specifics of the security vulnerabilities exposed by having list IDs that for voters that are so similar, where they're like 5 of the digits were the same, or and in thousands of voters, and the response that Mr. Nago provided to you, and then we were given copies of the December 28th response, really described, in my opinion, why it was done. In other words, that there was a request, why the request was made, what the intention was in developing this list ID addresses and these voter ID and using that for voter identification. So the reasons why it was done was articulated, I think, well in Mr. Nago's response. But I did not get a sense that it did anything to respond to the kind of security issues that were raised and discussed at the January 12th meeting. So that's what I just want to find out. If you're satisfied, Mr. Lamb, that your concerns about the security, the kind of hackability and ease of contaminating our voter ID system, because there are these list IDs that are so similar that are added to the voter ID. If you're satisfied with the response that you've gotten to date from Mr. Nago on that score, then I can sleep well at night. But I want to know it, because it has not been raised again. The more current testimony, Mr. Lamb, that you provided for this meeting today did not raise that issue again or reiterate that issue again. So I don't know if that's because you're satisfied with the response you got, or if you just think it's still an open issue, because we will later go into executive session as a commission, which will not be available for the public to hear our discussions, and have discussions of, as it indicates on the agenda, on whether or not we feel there's some follow-up investigative action that needs to be done with respect to the claims that you had raised previously, and that includes this list ID issue. So I put that to you, Mr. Lamb. Are you satisfied with the list ID response that has been given to you since the time you raised it at our last meeting?
Thank you, Commissioner Kohler. I do appreciate the explanation that the letter proposed to state how the list ID was being reformed, and I can see it could be a security measure, but it could not, and it may not be a security measure. I'm not convinced one way or the other. I know that the list ID is generated based off of MAC address and a timestamp in one format, and another random generation or another algorithm that generates a list ID. What I do see is that if this list ID is tied to one MAC address and one timestamp, then, or a certain algorithm for a timestamp, then it becomes very decipherable, that someone can easily look at what is in the list ID and gather information from it. Is that a security vulnerability? I'd like to see if that is addressed. And I guess it doesn't have to be addressed to me, but I think the commission should look into that, where if there's security vulnerability there, as well as there's known discussions about the type of database software that's used with this particular list ID format, that it's known to have provide access to from non-login points. Whether someone can verify that or not, we've seen the literature on it, but that is a concern, that this format doesn't provide the security that it purports to be.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Commissioner, any other commissioners, questions from the commissioners? Mr. Nago, do you have any more response at this time?
I believe we answered that list ID question subsequent to the last meeting. So there was another answer after that. I believe there was another answer after that email.
I didn't receive one. I'm sorry, Mr. Nago, so I don't know.
No. Okay.
So would you like to tell us what that response is to the security concern? And the concern about access points from non-login points?
So the short answer is we do use industry standard list ID generator.
But I thought we had received comments in our discussion January 12th from, for instance, Commissioner William Dean. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I think that it didn't seem that if it was, that I think that Commissioner Dean's testimony was something along the lines that if it was industry standard, it would not have generated something that is that had the commonality features that the list ID that has been produced for you from from what you're generating it from, that the industry standard wouldn't have produced something with this much similarity. I thought that was his expert opinion just from kind of knowing the industry of cybersecurity. But again, I don't want to put words in. I think that's my recollection of what Commissioner Dean had said. So you're saying, Mr. Nago, that you do use industry standard algorithm and software or whatever to generate these list IDs, and yet they're so similar to one another that it seemed to create a vulnerability that would not be industry standard. Okay, so if I could ask our fellow commissioner if I'm misrepresenting what you said or correctly identifying it, I don't know.
Yeah, essentially a name, a phone number, an address, those are not unique IDs. You want to have unique IDs that are truly unique. And so that means having your software produce what's called a 128-bit, doesn't have to be 128 bits, but something like that, 128-bit unique ID that uniquely identifies each voter, okay? And that unique ID also obfuscates or hides who that voter is. So it creates some privacy protections. And you can use that unique ID in other contexts within your information system to get work done on that record without exposing the name or who they voted for or what their address is. All right. And that is the industry standard way of creating a unique record. And that's, there's many different things that need to be done to create a secure system. But the root of all security and all information security contexts and the root of all encryption is that unique ID. So that's the core primitive that you want to have done correctly. And then as you know, your information system is built one layer upon layer, you can go back and use that unique ID as the core basis of identifying who these people are. So it does tell me that, you know, there needs to be, I would say, a person with a master's in computer science, you know, that's in charge of your database and your IT systems, you know, have a person that's, you know, qualified to do that work. You know, I would delegate that, but delegate it to a person who's solid, you know, who does their own programming, does their own SQL, and you know, understands how to, you know, manage a information system at the scale of a Hawaii voter database system. And, you know, in addition to making sure that your IT is in good order, you know, the primary function of the Office of Elections is that database, and the accuracy of the data in that database is at the very root of what the whole organization needs to do. So I think I mean, so far, you know, it doesn't sound like there's an actual event, like a cybersecurity event, you know, that, you know, is of concern. But I am getting a sense that a event could take place that would be meaningfully destructive. Okay, so I would say a complete pass of your IT systems and security, just do a whole pass of all the software and the data used, you know, bring in a consultant, don't pay them too much, you know, but you need to have somebody in your staff who knows how to hire good people. All right, you know, to do a cybersecurity review of your database and to review the columns and fields that your database uses, you know, just to have a comprehensive look of your system. All right, that's my advice.
Thank you. Snugger, you want to respond to that at all?
His recommendations are good. That's something we'll take a look at. We do use the information technology services, enterprise technology services, which is the state version, our IT for policy to IT section to actually help us with the security of the database. So we will be talking to them and seeing if we can implement any of Mr. Dean's, Commissioner Dean's recommendations.
Thank you. Anyone else want to just add in on the subject?
Yeah, just one more thing, and that's check your internal controls. To make sure who has authority, to make database modifications, and then are there records and logs kept automatically by the system to record database changes. Who are your database administrators? So the buzzword is internal control review. Right, most security breaches are not done by outsiders, they're done by insiders. Okay, so you want to make sure that your internal controls are sharp, and typically you want the chief of the Office of Elections, your CEO, to be the primary person of responsibility. So there are certain things that I would not delegate as the chief of the Office of Elections. I would have your thumb on internal control reviews.
Thank you.
Yes, Chair, I'm sorry, I've lost the image. I'm going to try to find it again. I can hear what's going on. I can't see what's going on. But I would like to just ask, we're fortunate there hasn't been or at least we're not aware of any incidents that have arisen from this vulnerability that is there. But I do want to see if I can get a commitment that this is a time of the essence type thing from Mr. Nago to do this kind of assessment of the system review and make sure that it is as good as it can be, because we sit here vulnerable. We have voter IDs out there that are based on addresses and names and phone numbers, and this I just want to get a sense of priority given to addressing this issue by the Office of Election.
Yeah,
Okay.
and sorry, one more thing to jump in on is that this is not foolproof. So the Iranians, nuclear people can testify that this is not a foolproof suggestion, but it is really good. Okay. And that is your primary database where you keep your voter registration rolls and other data. I recommend that be an air-gapped machine that's not connected to the internet, and have for $100 you can get in there and you can disable the wireless router technology on that motherboard or on the computer, and just make sure that it's never plugged in. Okay, and if you're using a thumb drive to transfer data onto it or something similar, that you run scans, really solid scans on that thumb drive to make sure there's no malicious software on it. But I would make sure that you're using air-gapped servers, to store your crown jewel database. And I would regard that database as your crown jewel of your whole organization.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other? We're going to move on. Okay. Sandra Ma, are you available? Sandy?
Hi. Good
Hi.
afternoon, Chair and members of the Commission. Sandy Ma for Common Cause Hawaii. Thank you for hearing my testimony this late Aloha Friday afternoon. So we are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to strengthening our representative democracy through voting and elections modernization efforts. You have my written testimony before you, and I'm not going to repeat it or read it. I do want to highlight a few key points. One is we request an update on how the AVR implementation is progressing. And we do appreciate the cooperation of the Office of Elections and keeping us updated, but we haven't received an update in a few months, and I'm just requesting an update at this time. Also, we like to offer our services and the services of organizations we work with across the nation and AVR implementation, and also design services if any forms such as driver's license forms needs to be updated or revised. We also like to seek the cooperation of Office of Elections to work with the county elections divisions to arrange site visits to see how the AVR process is working in person, given that our COVID numbers have come down and our government offices are opening. So we don't want to go in without properly announcing ourselves and working with the government agencies to ensure openness and cooperation. Also, we were wondering if we could get any data on AVR and how that process is going, if people are actually using AVR to update properly their voter registration when they are going in to update their driver's license or getting new driver's license or state IDs. And let's see, there was an issue that we were concerned about. It's the interesting forms that Maui, Kauai, and Hawaii County has. They actually, their driver's licensing departments of those counties actually send out forms to individuals that allow them to update or change their driver's license without actually getting a new driver's license. And so we have confirmed with Kauai, oh, excuse me, not with Kauai, but with just Maui and Hawaii counties that you can change the driver's license address without actually getting a new driver's license, but that doesn't have any impact on your voter registration information. And that kind of concerns us with the NVRA, because anytime you have a driver's license transaction, you're supposed to offer people voter registration opportunities or update your voter registration. Of course, that's what AVR is about. And so we were wondering if we could get also some assistance in updating those special forms that the counties have. And that's in our written testimony. And also we want to highlight one particular issue for this commission, and it has to do with private individuals or groups conducting voter fraud investigations on their own, and which is spurred on by the big lie. We've seen this across the nation in battleground states such as Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Florida, and even in states that are not battleground states such as Utah and North Carolina. We're concerned about such canvassing or investigations by such groups or individuals because this may be a form of voter intimidation, especially where there are large groups of minority voters. And we have those in Hawaii. Hawaii is the most diverse state in the nation based on our diversity index by the most recent decadal census. And so we just want to bring that to this election commission's attention, that we certainly don't want to chill anyone's right to vote, which is a fundamental constitutional right in the foundation of our democracy. Thank you for allowing Common Cause to submit testimony written and orally, and I'm available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Ma?
I have a question, yeah. If I could, this will, Commissioner Kohler, I noticed for the first time on the stationery, I noticed it for the first time. I'm sure it's been there forever, but in your letterhead, it says Common Cause Hawaii, holding power accountable. So I thought that was interesting in the context of those last remarks that you just made about, which are contained in the last paragraph of your written testimony. How do you, is it your opinion that the only way to hold power accountable is through having government examine itself, and that the citizenry has no role in holding government accountable? Holding power accountable?
I'm not quite sure what that question is referring to, Commissioner.
Well, it's that the concern that you're raising is in your written testimony, as well as what you just mentioned, your last remark. And I'm reading from your written testimony for today. It says that there are private individuals or groups conducting voter fraud investigation. Okay. And that you're concerned that that is aside from the political motivations that you're attributing to those individuals and groups, which I don't think this is the right place to discuss, but I'd be happy to if you want me to. You seem to say that there are right now lawsuits, you say, that are being conducted because of a concern that such activity by private individuals or groups who are trying to conduct what's being characterized as voter fraud investigations would have a chilling effect on future elections, on people, chilling effect on people exercising the right to vote in future elections. So clearly when you are asking somebody to voluntarily or not voluntarily share about what their experiences were in a past election, that's not having a chilling effect on that election. It's just examining and obtaining information about if there were, in fact, any irregularities occurring during
with all due respect, Commissioner, that does have a chilling effect for some people, not all people. You may feel eminently comfortable sharing that information. Some people do not.
I'm sure you're correct that some people don't, and so that's where they could say thank you, but no thank you. But I understand what you're saying.
Some people don't even feel comfortable saying that and being questioned about that. And so that is the point we are raising. So with all due respect,
I ask, with all due respect, I'm asking you, because you are a constant augmentation of the Election Commission. I have noticed that you are almost like an arm of this commission. You are here at every meeting. You are always providing input. And I've asked you in previous meetings as well regarding the main substance of your letter, which was about the AVR, and you were offering to come up with a script perhaps that the staff can use at the department, at the motor vehicle departments, so that they can actually make it clear to people who come in to get their driver's license that they have this right to vote, even though it's already in writing on the form, that you thought it might be more effective if there was actually some kind of script and you were offering to work with the department to do that with the county. So you're always very concerned about these issues. And that's why I'm asking you, what role, if any, do you see that the citizens, the individual citizens, private individuals, private groups, what role, if any, do you think they have in protecting against voter fraud or identifying voter fraud if it is occurring?
So the role of the private citizen that Common Cause sees is holding power accountable, as you quoted our logo and our mantra, which is public participation in the government process. And so we highly encourage people to understand civic engagement in the process for civic engagement. And so that's why I participate in these government meetings. And we want people to participate in these government meetings to know what our elected officials are doing, to know what our government boards and commissions are doing. So that is what Common Cause hopes to accomplish with our nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. So, but to go around questioning people and suggesting they do not have the right to vote, their constitutional right to vote, is highly damaging to individuals.
And I would agree that if what they're doing is running around trying to encourage people not to exercise their right to vote, that would be something very bad. And what I think may shed more light on this will be perhaps the outcome of some of these lawsuits that have been brought that you mentioned in your written testimony. So last, I just wanted to find out, are you asking us to do anything in the election, this body, this election commission? Are you asking us with respect to this issue that you've raised about these private individuals and groups, are you asking us to take any kind of action or consider taking any action at this time? That's all I'm asking.
No, thank you for that, Commissioner. I'm
Thank
just raising
Thank you.
awareness that as a neutral body upholding the elections and voting laws of the state, that the chilling effect that it could have if people are concerned that they may be that people may be going around questioning their right to vote, and that is something that we are highly concerned about. And so, but we did raise several asks in our letter.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see there's two people, or is there anyone else to testify? I see there's two people with hands up, but
Yes, Chair. The next testifier is Anthony Garnice, followed by Laura Nakaneluwa.
okay, thank you.
Hi, Chair.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you for having me today. My name is Anthony Garnice, and I had a question about the CTCL funding in the 2020 election. Is there a location that I can find it online, an accounting of that funding? That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Nago, did you hear that question?
Yeah, we'll have to get back to him on that. I don't have the answer at the top of. I don't have the answer at the top of my head.
Can we get your contact information so we can answer your question?
Sure. I'll. You want me to text it to you, or prefer not to give it out over this venue?
No, I understand. No, I don't want you to give it out over the. Where's our? I know Lori's.
Elections at Hawaii.gov.
Yeah, there you go.
Say again.
Elections at Hawaii.gov.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, the next testifier is Laura Nakaneluwa.
Okay, Laura.
Aloha, Chair. Thank you all for holding this meeting today, and thank you for allowing those of us that are interested to testify. I want to make an observation before I express some of my, or ask the questions that I have. In response to Adriel Lamb's evidence on the data, and then sort of observation of a sort of a higher than normal level of activity, Mr. Nago responded that there are often times when there are multiple checks done in the system. He went on to say something to the effect of, if Mr. Lamb wants us not to do that, if he doesn't want us to verify the system, then he can let us know, which in the spirit of best intentions, I would think that Mr. Nago would want to know if there are either unusual activity instances, or, as Mr. Lamb has given us a lot of, instances where voters who say themselves they have not voted have had their votes counted, etc. He is bringing a lot of verifiable hard evidence to the table in an effort to improve our process, and I feel as though this should be taken in goodwill, and the goodwill that it's being presented. I think Mr. Lamb is very measured and even-handed with what he presents. He vets everything before he presents it. He's very good with data, actually, and analysis. So I would just invite, Mr. Nago not to get defensive and feel as though he's being attacked or make snarky remarks like that, but rather just to maybe look to how we might be able to help improve the system.
But have you seen the response by the county clerks in response to Mr. Lamb's written questions?
Have I seen the
Yes.
response of the county clerks?
Yes.
Well,
I
it
read
was
through-
Mr. Nago and the county clerks, and it was a joint letter dated
Right.
March 16th.
Right.
I
I just
came
wanted, I just trying to figure if you've seen that or not. And I have nothing but the highest regard for Mr. Lamb. He's a very thorough person. I've been in meetings with him. But we did, and he will be the first to tell you, he just said it a few minutes ago, that we have really covered an awful lot of his territory. And while there will always probably be some questions, it's not that we have ignored this, okay?
Oh, I would never suggest, Mr. Anderson, Chair, I understand that you all are ignoring them. Those are not my words at all. So please don't ascribe that to me. I was only addressing Mr. Nago's comment here on this call today. I did peruse the response sent to Mr. Lamb. I did seem to see language that said we have not found sufficient evidence of certain things to merit an investigation, I think was my takeaway, but perhaps I need to go back and pull it up and reread it. And I will do that, sir. I promise you. So the second thing that observation that I just want to share is Ms. Ma's comment using the terminology, the big lie. I find that to also be extremely divisive, and she may call her organization nonpartisan, but that is a partisan talking point or propaganda. I think if we get into that kind of language here where we use terms like big lie, then we're getting a skew of operating together in good faith to try to bring out, areas of opportunity for improvement within our system here in Hawaii, within our voting system. So that just upset me a little bit to hear that. We have people working in good faith trying to bring evidence to the fore so that it can be examined and we can find out if there are pukas or areas of improvement that can be worked on. And some of these, talk about a chilling effect. Some of the information that and you have to remember, Mr. Lamb is one person operating on a very small scale, and he has uncovered so much already. That's one guy. So that has a chilling effect on me when I think about if we multiplied that times 1,000 people, what would we really uncover within this system? So we're just working to improve it. So I wanted to ask a couple of questions regarding some old business, if I may, just to get caught up, because I know I was on a few calls last year and one earlier this year, but I wonder if we have, I know that Mr. Nago at our request made a request of the legislature to consider how they might better secure the ballots, the chain of custody, like close the chain of custody. Is it possible to ask if anything along that specific request has been done, or if any actions being taken to secure the chain of custody from the drop boxes, from the drop boxes back to the ballot counting center, or from the post office to the signature verification center? Is there anything that I can, any updates that I can ask for there?
Yes.
I see you shaking. Okay, great.
Yeah. Scott, you want to, Mr. Nago, you want to answer the question, or?
I don't recall saying that I would ask the legislature. I would ask the legislature to do that. With that said, though, the county clerks and this office, we do believe that they're, we'll do everything we can to make sure it's transparent. I believe the hesitation with the county clerks regarding having official observers verify the signature process is they didn't want observers to not show up, but they didn't want observers to take the time to come to verify the process if there wasn't any ballots received, because they'll be the first to admit that they can't control the amount of ballots coming in. So it just depends on the mail flow. But we are committed to making sure that if they want to observe it, that they would do our best to make sure it happens.
Yeah, but we've also improved on the tracking the ballots as they come back, as far as the post office jumped in and we're going to have it as soon as rather than waiting till the county gets it, we'll know that the post office has the ballot. Has that been finished?
No, so in the previous 2020 election, we've had tracking for ballots returning, voted ballots returning. We didn't have the tracking for ballots going out to the unvoted ballots going out to voters. For the 2022 election, we will have that. We'll have both outgoing and ingoing tracking.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
That, and excuse me, if I can ask, that's for the vote. That's for voting by mail. So the individual voter can track what's happened to their ballot, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. Thank you. Now, focusing back on the first question, part of her question that Laura asked is about trying to have some kind of security with respect to chain of custody when the deposits are made into these voter boxes all over the place, as well as when when those boxes are transported to the counting centers. Because in the old days, you know, when we had voting machines, people using voting machines at polling places all over all over counties and all over the state, they would have observers. They would have observers from both all the parties kind of thing, representatives there observing the transport of the ballots as they were voted to the counting center, and or electronically, the downloads being transported electronically. So either the physical, if it was voting in person, or the data drops, if you will. So there isn't anything like that. We had a lot of discussion about that, and I seem to recall, Mr. Nago, that you expressed that you would make a request for there to be enhanced some kind of chain of custody, security observance or something. Not necessarily that you would ask for that from the legislature, but that you thought that that was something that needed to be improved upon. And we discussed that in several sessions last year, and we were looking forward to seeing some tightening up around that this year through the legislature. But I agree with you, Mr. Nago, there's certainly nothing in the legislation that you've been tracking and testifying on that addresses that issue. So I'm wondering what at this point can be done vis-a-vis the 2022 election to enhance the security of the transport from the boxes. Where the people drop in their live ballot, their voted ballot.
So the ballot drop boxes are administered by the county clerks.
Yeah, I know.
I'm just one part of the puzzle, so I would have to work with them to see what we can do to address Ms. Nakaneluwa's concerns.
Yeah, I know that on the chart that you provided, which is helpful, showing what duties are of the county and what are of the state. Clearly, those boxes fall into the jurisdiction of the counties, but so we know that you'd have to persuade them to do something about it. And we thought that you were going to be working on that at a minimum, short of actually proposing that there be some mandate put into legislation. Have you had discussions like that with the county clerk?
Yes, and like I said, we are committed to providing the transparency in the voting system. In the complete elections, it's just as far as the details and working that out, that's something that the county clerks would have to come up with the details, because like I said, this office we don't pick up the ballots, we don't make the arrangements for the ballot pickups, we don't have the vehicles to go out, we don't do the vehicle pickups, we don't pick up from the post office. Everything goes from the post office or those boxes to the county clerk's office for signature verification. When they verify signatures, that's all them. So for me to make any kind of commitment on their behalf, I can't do that.
No, commitment on your behalf is what we thought we had, that you'd be trying to get this rather glaring pucca in the integrity of our voting system addressed. And I knew by trying to do it through the legislature or trying to do it through persuasion with the county clerk. So if you could just report back to us by our next session on what, if any, progress they're telling you, the county clerks, on what they're doing on this regard, because clearly there was nothing comparable to this in our previous method of voting in the state of Hawaii, whether it was in-person voting, at voting centers, whether it was voting on machines in voting centers, or now this mail-in voting and dropping it in boxes, not even using the U.S. Postal Service, but dropping it into these black boxes, voter boxes. Nothing being unobserved by, at a minimum, observers, let alone filmed. Filmed is one expensive way to do it, is to have cameras on the boxes. But short of that, just having observers be there during the transport of these boxes to their next destination is a minimum of what can be done. It's not being done. And this is nothing like this kind of a breach in chain of custody has occurred before in any version of voting in Hawaii. So I'm just wondering, can you give us at least your commitment that you will visit this issue with the county clerks and report back to us at the next meeting on what, if anything, they're going to do to remedy that breach in our chain of custody of live voted ballots?
Okay, that's a fair question. It's a fair request.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, is there anyone else?
Laura was still, that was just one of Laura's questions. Do you have any others? I don't know.
Yes, ma'am, I do. Thank you, Commissioner Kohler. And just two more and I'll be quick. What process can we pursue to request the increase of voter service centers on neighbor islands and right here on Oahu? Last election cycle, there was so much, well, first there was a little bit of misinformation about when voters could vote and how, and we talked about that last year. Facebook posts and other information was going out saying this is the last day to register, the last day to vote, it's all in mail, and that just wasn't true. So the second part, or one of the next things to sort of suppress the vote, if you will, was that there were these remote, there was just one site on a couple of the islands where people who are out in remote areas had very little hope of making it to. People without transportation, people without the information, were not allowed or given the privilege or the opportunity to vote in person. So I just wonder, and that bears repeating, because I agree with my friends on the other side of the aisle that voter suppression is a terrible thing. We ought to make sure that every eligible person in this country, new citizen, old citizen, young, old, has every opportunity to vote. So what could be our process to increase? Is there hope? And Mr. Anderson, maybe you can give me your opinion. Do you think that we might have a chance to increase the voter service centers in the state across our islands so that more people have the opportunity to vote in person?
Well, first off, that's a responsibility of the county clerks.
I understand that.
And that's who you should be addressing this to.
I mean,
Scott Nago can, and myself or any of the commissioners can talk to the local, but that's their kuleana. And sometimes there's good reason that they don't or do or whichever. I off the top of my head, I don't know, but this whole thing has sort of been an ongoing, test. And I'm sure they've noticed that maybe there's some places were more active or less active or whichever than others. But again, that is a county responsibility. And Scott Nago can talk to them, and I can talk to them, and Commissioner Kohler or Commissioner Solomon or Commissioner whoever can talk to whatever, but the county clerks will make that decision on that particular subject.
Sure, I understand that. I guess what my response to that would be, we have a body of the Elections Commission for a reason, and we have the Office of Elections for a reason as well. These are oversight bodies, yes. And I wouldn't say governing bodies, but they certainly have responsibility to communicate, be an in-between body that is here to hear testimony and then perhaps help us improve our process. So, one person making a phone call or a dozen of us calling out to counties is one thing that we can do. But I think as a an oversight body, if we see or if we recognize that there's an opportunity to offer greater service to the voters of Hawaii, that we might ask whether or not it wouldn't be something that you all could either weigh in on or
Are
propose.
you aware of, I mean, is there, are you aware of quantity of complaints or types of complaints for your county?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And
Not
and
only
did
my
you
county, Maui
and
County,
did you
Hawaii.
share those? Did you share those complaints with anyone in the elections office?
I think if we look back over the minutes from last year, you'll find that I did. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that I did, but I've done more than that, Chair Anderson. I've called the Honolulu County Clerk's office to ask them, and they say that they're looking at it. They say that they're looking at it and considering it. But my question is to this body, and I don't know if any of the other commissioners have a thought about this. I would ask, all of you all, if this is something that you think should be suggested, or even a best practice captured, so that you can then assist the counties in understanding how they can be of better service to our voters.
So I can assure you that every member of this commission has the same. We want everyone to have access to voting who is eligible to vote. That's goal number one. So no one on this commission does not want more, but for every action, there's a reaction. Those boxes have to be maintained. They cost money, whatever. You have to also be efficient. And, our islands are very different. The Big Island is certainly different than Oahu. And we absolutely, as a group, I can assure you, are concerned about everyone being able to cast their ballot. One of the great things about mail-in is you don't have to do very much. I mean, that's a benefit. So, but some people like to go put it in a thing, which is perfectly fine, but you can't have one on every block. So that at some point in time, you have to divide up how you're going to do it. And if any other commissioner would like to jump in on this subject, please be my guest. Mr. Nago, you want to make any comment on this?
I can go and ask again, but I will not make a commitment. I can ask them again, but I will not make a commitment on their behalf.
That would be fabulous. Thank you, Mr. Nago. If you're just simply able to ask whether or not, even if we find out if they are working towards, expanding by 1 or 2 across the other islands, that would be great just to hear back. Okay, and then my last question is, I know we talked about this a few times in 2020 as well as 2021 early on. Where are we with the purging of the voter rolls? Or I'll use a more accurate definition, rendering certain voters inactive if they have not voted in the last 2 elections, or 4 elections. I think it's 2 well, you'll have to remind me, but there's a certain cutoff. If they haven't, if a voter has not voted in the last, let's say, 2 presidential elections, so 8 years back is my best memory, then they are rendered inactive. They're not purged though. And I remember having a little bit of a concern about that. And now even more so that Mr. Lamb is finding that some records are inactive, but yet they've voted, or whatever it was that he shared. That's triggering. But what is our process with that, and has that been done?
Mr. Nago, would you like to answer that question, please?
So the counties follow the National Voter Registration Act, or federal law, when removing voters. So a voter cannot be removed for failure to vote. The only way a voter can be removed is 1, if they ask to be removed, or 2, a mailing gets returned. Once a mailing gets returned, it triggers an inactive status, where the voter has up to 2 general elections to update their registration. If they don't do it within 2 general elections, they can be removed.
Can be removed, but there's a process, right? There's a process for that removal.
That was the process.
It's not automatic. There is nothing in this process that's automatic.
Right. And this is a federal law, okay?
Correct.
Okay,
So
Anything
you're
else?
saying that
Yes.
that the ballot has to be returned by the household, a voter
Not the ballot,
or
not the
somebody.
ballot, not
Yeah, the ballot has to be, I'm sorry, what has to be returned?
any election mailing. So it could be your yellow card, your voter notification card. It could be the ballot, but doesn't necessarily have to be the ballot. In fact, Hawaii has a law that says we don't mail out ballots to voters with questionable addresses.
Okay, so any mailing has to be returned. So are there, return to sender, are there instructions out there to the public that when you're talking to voters about how they should get registered, how we should all get ready to vote, are there also, is there also marketing or communications that comes out that says, if you've received a ballot that doesn't belong to you, or if you no longer wish to vote, you can return any mailing back to the Office of Elections or wherever it comes from and be removed or be inactivated? Is this process explained? Because it seems as though we keep, I feel like
it's explained.
hitting
It's also written on the mailers. Not the
Okay.
ballot, but if you look at your yellow card, it says if you do not reside, or if this person on this card does not reside at this address, please return it.
Okay. So, Mr. Nago, would you say that our voter rolls are in good shape? Because I feel as though they're just collecting. We had a number of dead people that voted. I think Mr. Lamb has those numbers at his fingertips. I don't. Do you feel people, of course, thousands that have moved away. Do you feel confident in our voter rolls? Is there anything that we can do to get them a little more shored up? That was a question for Mr. Nago.
I have
No.
my internet connection is unstable.
All right.
Okay.
I would just say that it would be immensely helpful if this issue was revisited at the federal level. It's not, trust me, it's not going to be, it's not going to be revisited anytime in the next 2 years for sure, but probably never. But in any event, that's really the crux of it, is that the federal law trumped actually what was more reasonable in our state law. Our state law provided a much more logical, reasonable, from a way to inactivate folks from voter rolls, to make it the voter rolls more reflective of people being present, being still residents in the state, not being dead, etc. But that got trumped by the federal law, and the federal law makes it very difficult to become inactivated. Because, for instance, I'll stop because I know the meeting's gone long, but if these mailings, these official mailings that are coming to people who were formerly tenants, let's say at a particular residence, or sons and daughters or whoever, if people get this stuff in the mail and they don't stick it back into the mailbox to be forwarded back to the sender, if they simply throw it in the trash, which I do every day with unsolicited mail, okay, or mail that I don't think is relevant, and I just toss it in the trash. The trash can is right next to my post box, so I think that's what's happening a lot of these times. People are not actually taking steps to ensure that the mail is returned to sender so that the deactivation process can then proceed. And they just toss it out.
You are absolutely correct. That happens all the time.
Yep.
Okay. I don't want this
Thank
to go
you,
on to
Chair.
midnight.
Yep.
Appreciate your time. I'm done. I just wanted to say thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to address
Chair, the next testifier is Noella Von Wiegand, followed by Corrine Solomon.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. Can you folks hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much for your time. When I went to vote at Honolulu Hale in 2020, I was very, very concerned because not one of the workers there asked for my ID. And another observation that I observed was that there was a great deal of goofing off with the people that were processing the line of people. And I take my vote very seriously. It's sacred to me. And I don't know if it's lack of training. These young men and women, I don't know if they're being paid or if they're volunteers, but voting is a very, very, very important, serious thing. And, you know, in today's world, these young men and women, there was not a level of seriousness and of sacredness to this process. And that troubled me very deeply when I walked out of there. And so I just, perhaps it's lack of training. I don't know, how Mr. Nago trains his people, but with all due respect, I would ask that in the next upcoming elections that these workers there take this very seriously. And once again, they did not ask for my ID. I showed it to them, but they did not ask me straight out of the gates, unlike when we would go in person, to the polling places in my neighborhood, my precinct. They were like, you better have your ID ready. And so I wanted to let you folks know about that. Thank you very, very much for allowing me to testify.
On what island?
Oahu.
Oahu, sir. Honolulu Hale.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis.
Chair, the next testifier is Corrine Solomon.
Okay.
Aloha, I'll keep this very short because I know it's late, but when you were talking about the looking into the IT issues with possibly the voter registration, I remember coming across something where there was a joint DoD Office of Elections contract awarded to the Gantt Group in 2020. And I don't know if the specific contract looked into the voter registration system, but there was supposed to be an after action report that was made available to you guys in November of 2021. Can you answer if maybe that would help clarify any action that needs to be taken as far as regarding with the IT issues that Adriel spoke about?
Nago, can you answer that, please?
I believe that was a solicitation put out by the Department of Defense Homeland Security to take a look at the election infrastructure, which included the voter registration database and things like that. I'm not sure if they issued their final report yet. We did not put out that contract. Like I said, it was done by the Department of Homeland Security or the State Department of Homeland Security. I can follow up and see if that report was issued and be happy to share it with it.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you, that's all.
Thank you. Is there anyone else out there?
Yes, Chair.
Deborah?
The next testifier is Deborah Bear Barbour.
Okay.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Was very interesting listening to everything today. I just have a comment about when I voted last time, and I should have written a letter, but I was just kind of really mad. I didn't think anyone would do anything about it. I voted at Honolulu Hale, and there were numerous signs saying no videoing, no pictures, no, whatever. And there was a person who was doing that. And I complained to the people at the desk and they did nothing about it. So he was using his camera. I think he was the APP reporter. And so I don't know if he let reporters in or whatever, but people had their personal names and numbers on papers, and he had a huge telephoto lens. I don't know what he was doing in there. And he also took out his personal phone and started taking pictures and everything. So I find that very disturbing that, it was kind of like, oh, we're good friends, so just let him in. We know who he is. I did complain, and I did talk to a lady who is the head of whatever, the volunteers or the personnel there. But, she did nothing really, because he just stayed there and did his thing. So I just want to let you know, since I'm here and you're there and listening.
Thank you for your comments. That's the second comment on some items from the city and county from a little jurisdiction that we can converse with them and just see what they know about that for the next meeting.
For clarification, is the press allowed into a voting area?
Yeah, well, that's a press allowed into a certain area of it. I mean, they're not allowed to watch
pictures of people and video them.
They usually do it to show how long the lines are at 6 o'clock
He
or
was
something.
inside. He was not outside. He was inside. Those stairs?
I don't know what the restrictions. Maybe Scott, Mr. Nago, can you answer that question? I don't know what the rule is myself.
Yeah. So previously, when we had jurisdictions like polling places, we did allow the media in. That's just part of the transparency process. We do remind them that they shouldn't be taking any personal information, pictures of personal information, but we do allow them to take pictures of the voting process.
Okay, so then why couldn't citizens do it?
That's an issue. Previously, you couldn't have phones in the polling place. I can only speak to the polling place because it was a sacred. People should be allowed to vote in an aseptic environment, free of distractions and everything.
He took out his personal phone.
Yeah, I'm not being there and not.
So you don't believe me what I saw? Is that what you're saying? Anyway, I just wanted to know the clarification. So any press can be in there. I just want to know for transparency.
That's if I were running it. It's up to the jurisdiction of. It's up to the person in charge, which would have been the city and county.
So it's up to the discretion of the person in charge, who they just let their friends in, then the people they know.
It's the county clerk who's responsible for this. So the county clerk for City and County of Honolulu. That's who's the boss of what goes on those premises.
Okay. Well, she wasn't on premises. So
no, she won't be there,
difficult.
but you can follow up.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so I should pose my question to her, probably in writing.
Him or her? I don't know if it's a him or her.
Yeah. I don't either.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's the clerk's office. It's called the county clerk's office, right. And they're in charge of those election sites.
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We have anyone else? Any commissioners have anything to add?
I have a question, just on.
You always have a question.
Yes, just a quick one though.
Oh,
I just would like, if you could explain, Mr. Nago, this is your March 16 letter along with all the clerks, county clerks. On page 6, they're kind of near the end, right above where it says discussion. You say this: finally, the law retains voter challenge provisions in which fellow voters can challenge the registration of a voter. For example, allegations that someone is not who they claim to be, or that they do not live where they claim to live. And then you cite Hawaii Revised Statute sections 11-25 to 11-54. So I didn't even know there is this provision in the law that allows fellow voters to challenge the claims of identity, claims of where the person lives. And many of the things that Mr. Lamb raised fall into that category, not all of it, but many of it. So could you just really briefly summarize, Mr. Nago, how does that work? Those provisions of law that you cite, Hawaii Revised Statutes 1125 to 1154, roughly just give us a summary of what is the process for a voter to file such a challenge, and with whom do they file these challenges?
So this law has been in the books for a while now, prior to me starting the elections, which is 25 years ago. Basically, any voter, a registered voter, can challenge another voter. It used to be in the polling place. There were two challenges, one in the polling place for not being who they are, not living where they live. You could also challenge prior to election day another voter for not being who they are or not living where they live. You would direct your voter challenge to the clerk of the county in which you are challenging the voter.
Oh, you mean that's on the site? On the site, I remember there were people doing.
No, but this is also prior to the election. So prior to the election,
okay.
So there were previous elected officials who went through this process because people would challenge their residency.
Mm-hmm. I see. Now, but it does not apply to after the election, such as Mr. Lamb identifying people after the election by, name and don't live there anymore, or say they're, all these things.
If he wants to,
could still make challenges.
If he wants to make if he wants to make a voter challenge, he certainly can. He would have to direct his challenge to the city clerk's office for Oahu voters, or the clerk in which that voter resides.
Okay, so it's not just beforehand, and it's not just on the spot there, right there in the polling place, because I remember doing that. Yeah, but even after that. Okay, very good.
Correct.
Okay, well, that would be helpful. Thank you for putting that into your response to Mr. Lamb. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other issues from commissioners? Hearing none, Chair would entertain a motion.
Wait,
adjourn.
I'd like to discuss that suggestion. I just sent Jamie a Word file, and I can read it. But this the duties of the election. This is going to be a motion to investigate some of the information that Mr. Lamb presented us previously. So let me read this. There's a file that I just sent to Jamie. That's a Word file, 1 page. Election Commission, March 18th, 2022. The duties of the Election Commission provided under HRS 11-7.5 include investigate and hold hearings for receiving evidence of any violations and complaints. At the last meeting, the Chair, Scotty Anderson, said, after hearing Mr. Lamb's testimony, said, I'll look into that. And subsequently, a meeting was held with the chair of the Republican Party and several other people that, to my mind, becomes an investigation. I'll look into it as investigating. The Election Commission has the duty to initiate investigations. Prompted by Mr. Lamb's information, I move to initiate an investigation into the 2020 Hawaii election operations of each county's Office of Elections. The rationale: Mr. Lamb's assertions provide information that challenges the integrity of the 2020 election. Kauai was originally determined to be Hawaii's initial foray into mail-in voting. The reason for this is that the Kauai Office of Elections is very competent. I know this from experience. And according to Mr. Lamb, every precinct in Kauai's District 14 and 16 were audited. I don't recall what he said about District 15, the Lihue District. Keener minds determined that the whole state should participate in this experiment. I say experiment as mail-in voting hadn't been experienced in Hawaii previously. The 2020 mail-in election in Hawaii was enlightening. Mr. Lamb's observations have offered information that point to several areas for improvement. The lack of random precinct auditing was pointed out. Also mentioned was the audit's documentation lacked required signatures. The requirement for observers of different parties to attend each ballot transfer was not accomplished. The investigation could include an audit of one randomly chosen precinct in each representative district performed by election personnel from different counties. In addition to revealing process inefficiencies and inaccuracies, election staff would learn from other counties' operating practices. An audit can reveal the errors of procedures and documentation of elections, standard operating procedures, and legal requirements. The intent of this investigation is to increase the integrity of future elections. Our mutual goal of every vote counts is advanced with this endeavor. There's been a lot of information and a lot of research, a lot of investigation outside of the Elections Commission that I haven't been privy to, and I got no idea what's going on. I do know what's going on Kauai, and I do know that transfers of ballots occurred without observers from both parties as required by law. I would ask that an investigation, that this commission initiate an investigation to see how we can tighten up this mail-in voting procedure so that every vote does count. And that's a form of a motion to initiate an investigation.
Is there a second?
I second.
So have a little discussion prior to the vote. You've had a
Excuse
chance
me,
to read.
Scotty.
What?
Scotty, excuse me. I'm sorry. I have a previous engagement. I have to
Okay.
bug out.
Okay,
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
thank you.
I also noticed we don't have Commissioner Dean with us for a while, at least not on my screen.
What are we down to? So has everyone had a chance to read this? Commissioner Curtis, did you read the Elections Commission letter that all the county clerks signed?
I'm not talking about the voter rolls. I'm talking about the procedures
Okay,
in each precinct, and suggesting an audit of each precinct is in order because inconsistencies have surfaced with the 2020 election. It deserves looking into, and this is the body to do that.
of every precinct?
No, it's the random precinct as required by law. I suggest a random
All right.
precinct. for
Okay,
each
all right.
district.
Mr. Nago, can you respond to that? I'm not aware of that particular law, but I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but go ahead.
So the law requires a set amount of precincts to be audited, randomly selected. So we did do that in each county where we did have observers. We stated in the last meeting, pick the precincts or pick the districts, because in this current model, we could not audit as fine to the precinct level. We can do that for the next election because we changed voting systems, but in this current, we did it by districts. So we've actually did more than the 10% required by law, and it was randomly picked. We like I said the last time, we didn't have observers sign the randomness, but they did sign the audit.
May I, if he's still here, Chair, if Mr. Lamb is still here, respond to that, because my understanding is that characterization of the audit that was performed is still not in compliance with the law based on the things that Mr. Lamb has raised. There are still non-compliance aspects, but I don't know if Mr. Lamb is still here. Apparently not.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you,
Oh, yes.
Commissioner Kohler. I'm still here.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, from what I
Mike.
understood from the communications with the Office of Elections is that there were no precinct boxes, so there was no selection of precincts, but that there were selections of districts, as Mr. Nago has said. But then when I asked about which precincts were audited, I was provided a list of precincts that were inclusive of those districts that were selected. So I was given a list of 40 precincts which are all in sequential orders, which does not show a random. And even with the audit of those district or precincts, it was a sampling of the districts and precincts. So it was not a complete counting of a of a certain precinct.
So not
there
a
was
single one, not a single one was completely counted in the eve, and none of them were selected randomly. Is that what you're saying, Mr. Lamb?
That's what I understand, that there was not a random selection of precincts or
And
counting precincts.
nor a complete audit of any precinct.
Correct.
Okay.
And again, a formal investigation by this commission, I think, is in order based on the information that we've received. I need to know personally that there were 2 people signing at each transfer of the ballots and inspection of the ballots, opening of the ballots, verifying the signatures. There's a redundancy that I experienced on Kauai participating in the elections that I couldn't fault. There are some signatures that were missing that Mr. Lamb mentioned, and missing signatures means that nobody's responsible, and we're the ones ultimately responsible. I think it's our duty to look into it.
Mr. Nog, are you aware of any non-signatures or any of this type of thing?
No, I don't know. Everything is done in all open ballots in the state, in the counting center, are done in front of the presence of official observers from both parties. Anytime we open a box, we do a seal certification form. We sign that, they sign off on that before we cut it open. When we lock it up, they sign off on that. Even the audit was signed off by the audit team.
That's what I'd like to see.
And that's good. That's good. And we want to ensure that that's what happened because of everywhere. I mean, with a random selection, a truly random selection of precincts and a complete audit of a precinct as well. And the motion that's made here would ensure that that would be done for one randomly selected precinct in each county. And that's not a lot to ask.
Mr. Curtis, I'm asking you to, could we look at your motion and make sure that we know what you're trying to find out here? Because I need to clarify in my mind, and some of maybe some of the others, are we to investigate a claim raised by Mr. Lamb, or is it because it needs to be tied to his complaints in order to fall within the agenda? I'm trying to figure out what we're trying to actually hit. What's our target?
I sent Jamie a copy of what I read that can be circulated, and I just like to see each precinct audited for procedure and protocol.
Each precinct in the state?
No, each of the random precincts per district as itemized in the letter. And I think that from my experience, I think there are some instances when 2 observers weren't available from different parties. And there's documentation that should be able to follow up that if every I's dotted and T's crossed, then we see that and we know that the election is kosher. And but in those instances where we all know something drops that's not exactly according to protocol, we can identify those and correct those for the next election so that we know that the election has integrity. There's been enough question of the integrity of the election to warrant us looking into it and just reassuring ourselves that that's the case and learning along the way, because this mail-in voting is an experiment. We're learning each step we're learning, and a little more we learn guarantees a little more of the integrity of the election and reassures everybody involved.
And you did read this whole thing, correct?
But he's not talking about the voter registration.
That's about the voter registration. That's a different thing. That has less weight with me because you can register and vote the same day of election. So that kind of takes a lot of the weight out of that voter registration roll when you can register on the day of the election.
Yeah.
So anybody can vote anytime. I just want to make sure the process is, it's a new process for everybody. Let's learn. Let's look into it. And that's the role of this commission, in my belief.
Would any of the other commissioners like to comment on this before we move on to take a vote? Mr. Nago, you got it. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Nago?
Commissioner Mota was going to speak.
I can't hear you.
Hi. The second is vote by mail.
Who's this?
Commissioner Mota.
Okay.
Wasn't this that was vote by mail?
I didn't hear you. I don't understand you.
Yeah,
I
it
don't
kinda
understand the
chopped up when
question.
when you were talking, it chopped up. Hard to hear you.
You're breaking up, Mr. Mota.
I think his question was this past election an election by mail election?
Mr. Mota, are you still there? Mr. Mota? I'm sorry, I did not hear his question.
Neither did I.
Hello?
There we go.
Okay.
Oh, there you are.
Got it.
You're back. Good.
I'm back.
Yeah. What's your question?
Was the 2020 election actually the second election of vote by mail?
No.
No, it's the first.
It was
the first.
Yeah.
Yeah, originally it was scheduled for Kauai as an experiment, but
Right.
they widened it to statewide, and
that's correct.
Oh, okay. Okay, I stand corrected. I thought, yeah, some place it started it earlier though.
other states have.
Yeah. Correct. Okay, Mr. Nago, do you have anything else to add?
No.
Okay.
Do we have enough for a vote? Is there
Yeah,
still
I
a
don't even know
quorum?
that. What do we got? What do we got left?
We have 6 of us.
But, and we want to clarify exactly, I want to clarify exactly what we're going to, if we do investigate, what exactly we're looking at. I don't want to go do things we've already done.
As a
Do we have a quorum?
We have 6, including yourself, Chair.
That's 6 out of, should be enough. So, Commissioner Curtis, if you would, I'm sorry to ask you this for the 8th time. Could you clarify, please, what you're asking us to vote on?
I'm asking that the Elections Commission initiate a formal investigation into the 2020 election and the processes and procedures regarding the handling of the ballots. Essentially, it's another audit of a precinct per district, just to see how it went and what didn't go well, and the documentation and the errors of documentation of an audit of a precinct and the handling and the return of its ballot delivery and collection. So if Jamie has a copy of this Word file that I read from, that's the form of the motion, that clarifies a lot of it.
It's been forwarded to the commission.
Thank you.
Okay. Scott, Mr. Nago, how would that be? That's got to be handled by each county, correct or incorrect?
The Elections Commission is responsible for the oversight.
I understand that. I understand that.
And
but
Mr. Nago is the supervisor of the election.
I just want to hear from him exactly how that line goes. So there's no confusion. Sir Nago? If we were to pass this, how does it work from your standpoint?
So we do have all the ballots here on Oahu.
Okay.
It's just a matter of finding the time to do this with the 2022 election in place, to go back and juggling the 2020 election and the 2022 election. I mean, that's my only concern.
It would be the one precinct per district statewide, correct, Commissioner Curtis?
That's what it states in my rationale.
So that would be 51 audits. But and it would be randomly selected, right? Each one. Okay.
So the reason we did it by district is because all the ballots are not separated by precinct. So we audited the district to get the results.
Okay.
But that's not how it's written in the law. But I understand why you did it, but it's technically not compliant to the law. Yeah.
So how would we be able to do it differently now that,
Well,
we weren't able to do then?
No. That's a really good question. Commissioner Curtis, do you have a thought about that? I mean, just in terms of the random selection aspect of it, because the random selection will have to be done in the same manner that Mr. Nago already oversaw that one sample.
It could be one district per island at random.
So irrespective of district? No,
Mr. Nago says the districts are the level at which you can audit. You cannot audit down to the precinct level. And that's okay if you have one district per island that's audited, just to see how that island performed with the physical performance of the requirements, like requiring observers from the two different parties at each step of the way.
Okay.
And
so it would actually not be, it would be one district per island. So there'd be 4, right?
As a practical matter, yes. And that works for me.
4 districts would be audited. Okay.
Mr. Nago, is that possible to do? I mean, reasonably possible to do?
To do an audit?
Of
4 districts.
4 districts. But that's something we've already we've done right after the election. We've done more than a district per island.
And pick a random and share the information with us. Let that be part of our investigation.
Scotty, this is Lori.
Yeah.
And I think part of this also is something that should be considered as to whether or not the motion falls within the agendized item.
Yeah.
So any kind of question about that, we could move into executive session.
Okay.
Well, actually, after doing this, I was hoping to move to put off the executive session, because the executive session has, as described on the agenda, is quite dispositive. It's about us deciding whether to proceed with investigating or not, or close it and end it with respect to Mr. Lamb's objection and claims. And you heard him, because I followed up with him today, asking him whether or not the responses given are satisfactory, and if not, in what regards they aren't. And so, he's going to be providing, he said, additional information, specifics, details, to show that each one of the responses on in the letter, March 16, as well as in his testimony, his written testimony today, for today's hearing, are not satisfactorily responded to. So he's going to provide additional evidence. So I think it's premature for us to be talking about whether or not to proceed with investigation or close the matter out. So I was going to move to postponed the executive session altogether today. And it's very late. So it can all be fresh when we do it at the next meeting. I think might be better.
I think that's a wonderful idea.
I'm shocked that you think something I said is a wonderful idea, Mr. Chair.
Oh, Commissioner, come on.
I'm glad. I'm glad. I'm tired too. I'm 60.
No, I think that's a really good idea, because if we're going to do something like this, I really want to do it absolutely correctly. But the other thing I want to concentrate on is that the 2022 election is just months away. So,
but that's all right.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
The legislative session is still plugging away, so we can still plug away. We just shouldn't wait to have our next meeting in 2 months.
We won't wait, but I really want to narrow this thing down, and I'll be happy to take. I mean, I want to satisfy Commissioner Curtis, and I want to satisfy the voters of the state of Hawaii. So that's paramount.
But there is a motion on the table by Commissioner Curtis, and I seconded it. And then there was a suggestion by the Deputy AG, Lori Tanagawa, that maybe it needs to be discussed in executive session because it may not comply with what was specifically identified in the agenda. So at the next meeting, we could specifically identify it in the agenda.
I would like to do that, and we all know, hopefully by then, kind of what we're talking about.
And we could all read. We can all read the matter.
We can all read it, and also I think we'll clarify what we're really looking at, because I really do want to answer the question properly without. And we can have our next meeting relatively soon. We don't have to wait months and months. We're talking about something in the next few weeks. Is that all right with you, Mr. Curtis?
You do have an active motion on the floor, whatever procedurally works. I don't mind deferring it for a couple weeks, but you do have an active motion on the floor.
Well, we can also withdraw that and
no, we're not doing that.
Well, if Mr. Curtis isn't withdrawing, I'm not withdrawing my second either.
And it's not up to us. Now it's not up to us. Once it's on the floor, it belongs to the commission. So we can defer action on the matter and reschedule for a specified date.
And that's fine.
I would ask for a specified date now that it's being deferred to.
What would you like? 2 weeks, 3 weeks? What do you want?
1 week, 2 weeks?
As long as it's 3:45 like today, I could do it any day.
And we talk about the next election. It'd be good to have our stuff together before the next election, and this might aim us at that.
Yeah.
Is my purpose for the whole thing.
Okay. So what is
I don't know about 3:45.
Well, it's just that my problem is, except on Wednesdays, and, I work till 3, except on Wednesdays. So that's why. But it can be 3:30 instead of 3:45 if it's going to be a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And of course, I'm wide open Saturday and Sunday anytime.
Okay.
Friday afternoon works. Wednesday anytime works. 23rd, 30th, or April 1st. April 1st might be appropriate.
Okay. Okay. Is that like an amendment to your motion?
April 1st is what day? What day is April 1st of the week?
April Fool's Day.
Yeah, but what day of the week is it? Friday?
Friday.
Friday, April 1st, and it would be what, we're saying 3:30, I mean 3:45 or?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, 3:45.
Okay.
Okay.
It could be 3:30. If you guys want to start 3:30, that's cool. I could be back by 3:30. I could be here.
How's everybody? Everyone else okay?
So is it 3:30? 3:30 on April 1?
Yeah.
3:30.
So we need to take a vote though. So there's a motion and it's been seconded. All those in favor? Aye.
No. There was no motion to defer yet.
Oh, okay.
No. So somebody needs to make the motion to defer and to put on the agenda the pending motion that's there now that was seconded and brought by Commissioner Curtis. And to put that on the agenda along with the executive session and other items on the agenda, like follow-up from Mr. Lamb, et cetera, or anybody else, just like a regular.
If it's appropriate, I would move to defer the action on this motion until April 1st, 3:30.
And little Commissioner?
Oh, I second on that.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
One no. Okay. Okay, I think we've done our damage for the day. I appreciate all of your input. And we'll see you on April Fool's Day. Thank you very much for your participation. Yes.
Scotty, I'm sorry. Just for clarification on the roll call vote, how did Commissioner Mata vote?
Commissioner who? We didn't do it by name.
Yeah,
It was a
maybe.
voice.
So I think it's in order to clarify, actually, maybe it would be better to go through a roll call vote on the motion to defer action to.
Okay. All right, we can do that. Jamie?
Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Curtis,
Yes, please.
Commissioner Dean, Commissioner Kikuchi,
Aye.
Commissioner Kohler,
Aye.
Commissioner Kuwata, Commissioner Mata,
Aye.
Commissioner Seilstad,
No.
and Commissioner Takinaka left. That's 5 yeses and 1 no.
So now I move to adjourn.
It's been moved. Do I hear a second? Please.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? No. We'll see you on April Fool's Day.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.